Today, the government is announcing, as you've seen, the details of the major projects that make up the New Zealand Upgrade Program, the most significant investment in public infrastructure in a generation, designed to future-proof and grow our economy. New Zealand has had underinvestment in the core public facilities we all use, and that has happened for too long. Our schools and hospitals have been run down, or they don't have the full range of facilities they should, be it a new school library or a neonatal unit. There is unmet need across the country, and this program aims to fix that.
It's literally all of National's work, and it's all things that the government cancelled at the start of their time in office, whilst they've done nothing since then other than sort of argue and discuss and I suppose frankly faff about on light rail. It's now been our work re-announced, and I suppose I'm flattered by it in a way because as Transport Minister it is all work, projects with the Tauranga Northern Link, whether highway up in Whangarei or many other projects that we did.
It's certainly later than all of us would have expected, and a lot of these projects, were pretty well advanced. If we think about Tauranga Northern Link, Ōtaki Northern Link, I mean, those projects were pretty close to shovel ready 2 or 3 years ago. So, look, in that sense, yes, it is lost time, and we can all be critical of that. But better late than never. We're certainly pleased to see it on the cards now.
Scott Morrison's one of those people. The Treasurer was spelling out his interest in this week's budget.
To support growth, we choose to invest in building Australia, rail by rail, runway by runway and road by road.
Yeah. That sounds welcome, doesn't it? We need to be investing in infrastructure because it increases productivity. Jane O'Sullivan from the University of Queensland isn't so sure.
It would if we didn't overcrowd them. So if we're just building more infrastructure rather than better infrastructure, and then we're filling it up with more people, we're not actually advancing. The problem is that people assume that all infrastructure is investment.
Yes. And
that's not true. An investment is something that if you didn't do it, you wouldn't be any worse off. A recurrent cost is something you have to do in order not to go backwards. So if we're adding 350,000 people to Australia every year, clearly if we don't provide any more infrastructure, we're going to be worse off over time.
Right, so
all of the infrastructure that we have to put in place just so that hospital waiting lists don't get longer than they already are, and that trains don't get more crowded, and that sewage treatment plants don't get overwhelmed, that's recurrent cost. That's running in order to stand still. So all of that is bad debt if we're actually borrowing to pay for it, which the state governments to a large extent have been.
This takes a bit of thinking about. Jane O'Sullivan's framing this in a way that you may not have heard before. To follow it, you have to pay attention.
The key there is that a lot of the things that we spend money on are durable. And so we're spending a certain amount of money this year, but we're actually enjoying the services of all of the infrastructure and equipment and even the professional trained people that we've put in place over years. So if we think about infrastructure lasting for around 50 years, then each year, in order to maintain the turnover of that, we'd only be having to pay for about 2% of it. If our population's growing at 1% per annum, we suddenly have to buy 3% of it because we've got 2% for the turnover and 1% in order to expand it to hold 1% more people. So we've gone from 2% to 3% that we're paying for. That's a 50% increase in how much we need to spend on infrastructure. So if we're growing at 1.5% per annum, which Australia has been doing lately, that's like a 75% increase in the bill for infrastructure. And that bill isn't insubstantial. Just the turnover is about 13% of GDP. So adding 1% population growth is an extra 6.5% to 7% of GDP that we've got to divert from other spending in order to pay for that extra infrastructure.
What Jane's saying is the growth in the population ends up overwhelming the utility we get from the infrastructure that we're building because of the growth of the population. So we never catch up, and it always costs more.